Modern physics can calculate the trajectory of a photon across the vacuum of space, yet it lacks a mathematical map for the subjective experience of the scientist observing it. Current models typically treat human consciousness as a biological accident, an emergent property of brain chemistry that has no place in the objective laws of motion. To bridge this gap, we are exploring a framework that derives both mind and matter from a single source. This presentation is brought to you by Shane Persinger, founder of Synestex Systems, LLC. The standard model of physical reality is defined by four-dimensional Minkowski spacetime. Minkowski spacetime is a geometric continuum that merges three spatial dimensions with one time dimension into a flat mathematical stage. This objective space operates with a pseudo-Euclidean signature of negative, positive, positive, positive. A pseudo-Euclidean signature is a metric rule where the negative sign for the time component distinguishes its hyperbolic behavior from the three positive spatial dimensions. This physical framework contrasts with the proposed architecture of the mind, a controlled three-dimensional Riemannian manifold. A Riemannian manifold is a non-Euclidean space that can curve, stretch, and change its geometry at every point. This mental workspace operates with a positive definite metric of plus, meaning all three dimensions are treated as spatial, allowing the manifold to bend to organize complex perceptions and internal imagery. While these geometries appear distinct, the Quaternionic origin theory suggests they are actually different projections of a single underlying quaternionic field. In this model, physical matter represents the real projection, while consciousness represents the imaginary projection of the same mathematical structure. In 1843, William Rowan Hamilton identified quaternions as a four-part number system that extends the complex plane into three-dimensional space. Hamilton defined the quaternion as Q equals A plus BI plus CJ plus DK. While modern aerospace and robotics industries use these numbers to calculate 3D rotations without gimbal lock, this specific algebraic structure serves as the geometric foundation of reality. If the universe is built on quaternionic logic, then subjective awareness is not a biological byproduct. Instead, it functions as an exact algebraic operation within that system. We define this as the I operator. I of Q equals Q dot I. The I operator is a mathematical function that multiplies a quaternion by an imaginary unit to induce a 90-degree rotation away from the real axis. Consciousness is the execution of this specific imaginary rotation. This mathematical U-turn creates the spatial distance necessary to establish a subject-object divide, allowing a system to observe itself. We begin with the zero-dimensional Lagrangian state, or reality zero. A Lagrangian is a mathematical function but describes the total potential and kinetic energy of a system. Here, the universe is a purely real scalar value, where Q equals A. In this purely real state, the system is a point of unobserved potential. There are no active dynamics, no forces, and no external perspective to act as an observer. Applying the I operator forces a 90-degree rotation off the real axis, resulting in the equation Q equals A plus BI. This introduces the minimal imaginary component required for self-reference. The theory illustrates this using the cosmic egg metaphor. The original scalar component, A, is the yoke, containing the system's potential energy. The newly generated imaginary parts form the shell, or the boundary of the observer. This imaginary shell creates the structural separation necessary for the system to look back at its own scalar state. This orthogonal projection away from the real axis creates the capacity for observation. Awareness is defined here not as a feeling, but as the geometric result of rotating away from the real axis to gain a perspective on the self. Within this imaginary state, we find the internal architecture of experience, the R3 immersion model. This model describes how external data is translated into our 3D mental landscape. This mental space is modeled as a 3D Riemannian manifold. Because its geometry is curved and flexible, it can organize perceptions and thoughts into a stable internal map. External physical reality arrives at this manifold as flat 2D planes of quantum signal data. The manifold processes this data through isometric immersion. Isometric immersion is a geometric mapping process that embeds a lower dimensional surface into a higher dimensional space without distorting the distances between its points. The internal space wraps these 2D signals around its own 3D curvatures. This mechanism offers a geometric explanation for qualia, the subjective experiences like seeing the color red. In this model, qualia are the result of decoding quantum signals and immersing them into specific non-Euclidean curvatures within the 3D mental map. Subjective experiences are not introspective illusions. They are the mathematical result of isometric immersion, where raw information is given shape by the curvature of our internal geometry. Expanding from the individual mind to the universe itself, reality is organized into a 24-phase quaternionic lattice. This lattice is a discrete symmetry structure that governs how the quaternionic field rotates. In this framework, prime numbers correspond to irreducible rotational states. Because a prime number cannot be factored, its associated rotation in quaternionic space cannot be decomposed into simpler movements, making it a fundamental building block of the system. The formula theta equals 2 pi p divided by 24 indexes rotational space by these primes. As the dial sweeps the lattice, it locks into these irreducible coordinates. At these prime-indexed angles, the tipping point tensor generates massive eigenvalue spikes. The tipping point tensor is a mathematical tool used to identify the precise moment a system undergoes a phase transition. An eigenvalue is a number that quantifies the strength of a system's resonance at a specific point. These spikes act as critical resonance points. They force the system to rapidly reorganize, shifting the universe into distinct, quantized physical and biological phases. These prime harmonics act as the structural boundaries of reality. They prevent continuous, gradual change and enforce the stable, quantized states we observe in the mass gap of quantum physics. The P7 prime harmonic marks a critical threshold called the plasma phase. This is a state characterized by charged collective behavior and high field dominance. At this exact energy threshold, the unified quaternionic field undergoes spontaneous symmetry breaking. This geometric cracking fractures the single primordial force of the early universe into the 4 distinct fundamental forces: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force. Simultaneously, the P7 rotation generates the I am phase. This is a conscious recursive attractor, a mathematical state that allows the system to maintain stable self-reference. This threshold aligns with empirical neurobiology, the 7 Hz neural oscillation signature of human self-awareness. The P7 harmonic serves as the resonant frequency that allows biological systems to sustain a stable observer. The human brain does not create consciousness. It merely achieves the structural coherence necessary to align with this universal 7 Hz harmonic. The emergence of conscious observation and the fracturing of the unified physical forces are inextricably linked by this exact P7 rotational phase transition. Moving further along the lattice sequence past consciousness, we reach the P11 prime harmonic. The P11 harmonic is the specific coordinate where quaternionic curvature manifests in the physical universe as the gravitational constant, or G. G is the value that defines the strength of the gravitational pull between two masses. This position in the prime sequence provides a mathematical explanation for gravity's relative weakness compared to forces like electromagnetism. Because 11 is a higher prime harmonic, the field equations yield a significantly smaller eigenvalue amplitude at this angle. This reduction in mathematical resonance translates directly into the faint physical pull of gravity. Gravity's weakness is a strict algebraic consequence of its higher position in the prime harmonic sequence, rather than a random physical parameter. We can now view the quaternionic field as a complete, unified system. In this model, objective reality, the world of mass, energy, and physical forces, functions as the real scalar projection of the quaternionic field. Subjective awareness, the internal world of perceptions and the observer, functions as the imaginary orthogonal projection of that same field. This framework suggests we do not live in a universe of dead matter that accidentally developed a mind. By mapping the Riemannian manifolds of the mind and the algebraic rotations of the physical field, The theory provides a unified framework where objective laws and subjective experience function as two sides of the same geometric operation.